Hey everybody, this is Kurt Molly again, here with a really good friend of mine, Jaime Masters. Now, I've known Jaime a very, very, very long time. I want to say almost the entire time I've been in this online marketing space. We know each other from, again, David Gonzalez and the Internet Marketing Party. Now, let me tell you a couple of stories about Jaime. One, she's absolutely brilliant. She is a stay-at-home entrepreneur, mom, owns a business. She also owns real estate. She also has her hands in other businesses. So when we're talking about like work from home and a podcast, don't let that fool you. One of the things that she has done a long time ago, and one of the main reasons that she's here that I want to talk to her about, is she started a podcast called Eventual Millionaire. Well, kind of think about what just that title is. Why not interview a bunch of people who are already highly successful so I can kind of learn on my own and figure that one out? Publish those as interviews, publish them as podcasts, create a business around it, create a mastermind around it, create products around it. Oh, that just makes a lot of sense. And you're learning the entire time. And people are like, oh, James, this is a great idea. And I'm like, great. This is brilliant. You are interviewing and aligning yourself with great people. Now, so when this whole kind of idea of, I know my friends are not traveling, I know I have some ideas, I'm getting so excited to introduce Jaime. I knew when my friends weren't traveling that I had an option to interview them. I knew Jaime had done this with Eventual Millionaire, and really I've heard along the lines, almost no one says no to an interview request, especially at a time like this. All of a sudden, I have 70 some people lined up. All of a sudden, I'm getting some amazing advice. And as I'm getting amazing advice, I do think, oh my goodness, I didn't invite Jaime. But I want you to remember this. We get invited to each other's birthday parties. Birthday parties for her is a huge deal. So she goes all out. It's a ton of fun. So leaving Jaime out of something is something I couldn't do. I got a bunch of ideas from here, but trust me, I kind of told her earlier before the pre-interview, I am literally in Messenger, like I got to message her before anybody else messages, just to let her know that she's brilliant. She's amazing. She's a personal friend. I've known her for many years. We've talked about many, many, many topics. I love her dearly, and I cannot wait to start talking about that brain of yours and get some of your ideas, because I know you can help a lot of people. So thank you for doing the interview. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I love you too. And I was totally like, hey, he's got a really great list. And he totally didn't text. And then literally the next day I was like, well, thank goodness we're friends. Okay.
Thank goodness that we're still going to be friends.
Choices, Kurt. You had choices. You made the right one. So, it's good.
So I'm going to be very open about this, but I'm not going to go into detail. Jaime is one of these people that I've known for many, many, many years, that she's known a lot of other people for many years, kind of same thing in my circle. She's one of those people I pull to the side that knows where the bodies are hidden. And I'm like, hey, that presentation that so-and-so said, and we actually know the history behind it. So I just want to preface this, because as Jaime and I are telling stories, a lot of it's not just surface level because we're at the event and saw a presentation. It is, we were hanging out backstage, someone said something, this is what they're doing, that led to, again, another reason I wanted to have you on here, right? I remember at one time we were going to live events together, and you would have your assistant go in and take cliff notes for you, so you can network and really learn the insights from entrepreneurs outside, which is just great. So I'm going to stop talking and ask you a couple of questions. So how did you go from this thing? Because everyone likes to hear the story. Everybody has an up and down journey. How did you go from this thing from employment to even considering working online?
Oh, we do not have enough time. So I will be as quick as humanly possible. So I made 6 figures when I was 22 and then hated my life because it was miserable, right? That one of those stories. It was video on demand. I was a programmer for a while and then a project manager. Right. Super sexy. I used to fly around with an expense account and hated my life. It was awesome. Yeah. But then coming from that, especially because I was the breadwinner and my husband at the time was a professional juggler. It was like, I can't quit my job because of that. And so it was a shift by the time I actually had kids. So I've been doing this for, my son's 13 now, 13 years, which is a very long time.
Oh, so you got into this the year he was born.
Right after I quit my job then and was like, crap, I should have had something to go to and didn't. Anyway, it was a whole thing. It was awesome. Very unknown and uncertain times, very similarly to what we're in.
That's why I asked the story. So yes, please continue.
But the unfortunate thing is it took the catalyst of me having my son and I couldn't travel around for work for me to actually do something about it, because it was too scary for me to make the leap on my own, just so we're clear.
There's a really interesting distinction there. So will you say that part one more time? You didn't decide to start doing something else until when?
Until I had a catalyst, which was my loving son. Yes. So, I mean, the hard thing is when you're making good money, quote unquote good money. Everybody looked at me like I was super successful. I quit my job at 24, had my son, and it was like, oh, now what? I can't be miserable my entire life. And yet the entire time that I worked at that job, everybody told me to quit. Like, I can't quit because of health insurance. I can't quit because of this. I can't I have all the excuses.
This is what a lot of people feel right now, right? Like this is why I want to do some of these videos so people have an idea of like, I didn't even know that was possible too. We're interviewing Rachel before, and Rachel's amazing. Rachel actually talks about coming up with ideas, putting them on coffee mugs, and she's made $500,000 last year just coming up with ideas on coffee mugs. And I'm like, what? She's like, oh, it doesn't take any skill. It just takes people don't even know their options. Like, that is amazing. So, okay. So what was your first online business then? So you decide that you have your son, you're like, what is that? What do you do next?
Well, I did a lot of different things. So side note, I tried a bunch of things that didn't work. I was actually doing a lot of project management work, freelancing for a while for some guys that had a very viral online video back in the day called EP Bird. They did Diet Coke and Mentos videos. So I was actually working with them back in the day. I know, right? Before 50 million views online, before it was cool to be online like that. Nobody really bought anything, but it was great. Lots of video views.
By the way, that is interesting because we've had a conversation with our good mutual friend, Josh Lee, and we've talked with a lot of other experts here. It used to be about hundreds of thousands of clicks, tens of thousands of leads. Now it's about that closer personal information. So I want you to unpack that for just a quick second. How many views and what did you say about monetization?
They had over 50 million views online, and they only got paid from sponsorships from big companies like Coke. They made almost no money, except back in the day when rev.com and all that fun stuff. So back in the day, I think they made maybe $10,000 in actual ad revenue.
I just like to show people behind the scenes where it's like,
yes.
Hey, a lot of people are like, if the video blows up, no, I know people on Oprah and other big things, or when this happens, that they're not making any money because they're not aligned with the thought process of how to monetize it. And they just think a high number just benefits in it. Really
well, even for me, I was on Yahoo's homepage 6 times. And I remember when I was first on Yahoo's homepage, people from high school were emailing me like, you've made it. And I made $0. My site went down. It was actually hell instead. So anyway, just as a side note, it's not all about the eyeballs.
I'll never forget, and I think I've told you this story before. It was a huge aha for me. This person at one of these events, I can't use too many labels because people will know, but they're like, yeah, I've been on Dr. Oz. I've been on Oprah. I've been on The Doctors. I've been on and named a couple other shows. I'm like, yeah. And then he literally goes, I don't know how to monetize any of it. And I'm thinking, the whole world wants to be you. But once they find out what it's really like to be you, and then there are people like, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful manner, there are people like Jaime that maybe you've never even heard the name before, but she's connected to some brilliant people. She doesn't need 10 million downloads. Like, it sounds cool to get that, but to build really great relationships. So, okay, you did a bunch of different stuff. Where did you trip upon the idea then for Eventual Millionaire? Like, that's one of my things where I heard that you did that and I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to get to know more about her because she has a lot of different variations of information that it's going to be fun to talk to you. So where did you get that idea?
Well, a couple things. So one, and not a lot of people know about me in general. When I started being a business coach, I had a mentor. So I worked with him for over 2 years for offline businesses, not online in any way, shape, or form. So everyone thinks I'm a business coach for online stuff. Plumbing companies.
So think about like Accenture or something like that kind of consulting where you're working with more business consulting straight up.
Yeah, like literally like $2 to $3 million businesses that are blue collar. I'm from the middle of nowhere in Maine, also, side note. So that's where I sort of got my chops because I ended up meeting a mentor. And this is a bit of a side note, but I think it's really important for anyone to hear. I literally went to the local business coach and went, hey, I'm thinking about getting into coaching. This was quite a long time ago, 12 years ago now. And he ended up taking me under his wing. So I worked for him for 6 months for free, side note. So this is way before Eventual Millionaire. I had the domain name, but I wasn't actually using it for anything. And then when I finally went on my own, probably 2 or 3 years after I started being with him, that's when I started Eventual Millionaire. Mostly because I wanted to test this online thing. And I started a blog and I thought it was a cool name. It actually was about paying off my $70,000 in debt first. Nothing to do with nothing to do with interviewing millionaires or anything like that. So I did that. I blogged for 6 months, realized I hate writing. which is always fun. And I asked my mastermind group, because I had a personal mastermind group that's now been running for almost 10 years, personally with Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income and some really, really amazing humans. And I was like, I hate writing. And they go, you should start a podcast and you should interview millionaires. And I went, I don't know any. So how do I do that? Right. And that was 10 years ago. And the show's been going ever since.
So, okay. So first of all, I want to unpack a couple of things that you just said there, because this is really, really great. So one of the things that I tell people is that I'm like, hey, look, my girlfriend's heard this story over and over. I lost all my money a long time ago in 2007, 2008. I got sued by Facebook. One of the best things that happened in both of those times is when I lost all my money in real estate, I went to the internet marketing party, met people like Jaime. That was right around the exact same time. When I lost all my money in, or when I got sued by Facebook, I was surrounded by a bunch of entrepreneurs. Again, she was there as well too, that we could talk through a lot of these different issues and stuff like that. Like, I'm like, oh, I can save my business. Everything can be done on my own. No, it's not done on my own. So what I hear you saying is being in a crowd with other, sorry, not in a crowd, very specific people. That's why I wanted to bring a bunch of the world experts on here. And it started to give you ideas, and someone gave you a suggestion that you didn't even think was possible. Now, I want to talk about this because there's a lot of people who are listening. They're like, I can't do that. And you just said that. You're like, oh, I can't do that. So what did you, and then you're like, oh, then 10 years later. And I'm like, oh, hang on a second. What happened next? So it's just like, fine, I'll just do one. And I just called people and they just said yes. Or what? Like, people want to believe that they can do it too, right?
Yep. Totally. Well, and that's the thing. My town that I grew up, 2,000 people, right? I asked my mentor that I've been working with, I go, do you know any millionaires? And he goes, none that are going to go on your show and tell anybody that they have $1 million. And I was like, great, thanks. Tail between my legs, walk away, right? Yeah. So literally it was, I started telling people, I went on iTunes, first of all, back in the day, looked up podcasts to find other people that said they were millionaires already, cold emailed them before I even had a podcast, because I didn't want to start one if I couldn't get them to say yes to begin with. So I made the date 3 months in advance and emailed 3 people, right? Frank McKinney was my very first interview. I said the word excellent, I think 17 times in a row. It was so horrible. It was my first interview. He didn't even ask, right? Like, it was, whoa, it was not good. Let's say that, but it worked. The fact that 3 people said yes, I went, wow. I was planning on doing 1 a month because I thought maybe I could get 12, and that was it. Now we're up to almost 500 episodes. So eventually, after a little while, we got a lot of people to come to me now, which again, best networking tactic ever, to be like, hey, can I introduce you to a millionaire? Like, well, didn't even realize it back then.
So I was taught, we interviewed Matt Wolf and Joe Freer, who I know that you know as well too. Yep, I love when you get that face, because you know a ton of people like, oh yeah, I know these people. And I didn't realize this, because I like running a lot of long form video in the middle of Facebook. I've told you this, like, people will watch our entire interview in the middle of Facebook for like $1 for 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, that's great. And Matt's like, yeah, we were looking at stats about how long people actually watch internet videos. You know, it's 15 to 30 seconds to a minute. And then, you know, overall consumption. I mean, Kurt, your trick works at all. But then we also looked at the stats when someone listens to a podcast, and it's something like 80% of them listen almost all the way through. And I'm like, what? So here's what I think is really interesting, because I found this out on a little scale from doing these types of interviews, nothing like what you've done. So many people, and actually, just to be clear, all the podcasts that I'm on, I advertise all the podcasts that I'm on in the middle of my funnel, even though I don't have any credit to an affiliate link or I don't get control of their site. What will happen is Mike Dillard had me on a podcast, perfect example. They click on the link. Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but a high percentage watch the autoplay of the podcast, listen to the podcast. My phone starts ringing off the hook. Can you talk about that intimacy, about how people feel like they get to know you and trust you with just a podcast?
Well, so when you imagine this too, video is great. That's awesome. But when you have headphones in, like, I'm in your head right now, right? And what we found, especially going back and hearing people, when I meet people in person, they're like, oh, we're like besties. And I'm like, I don't know who you are, so that's really creepy from my side, but I love you too, right? So because they feel like they know, like, and trust you more than anything else, because you're literally like a voice in their head, they can build a much stronger relationship with you because of that, especially with that consistency. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. It's interesting because, like, well, let me ask you this. you're a pretty energetic person now. Have you always been this way? Like, is it easy for you to call up and ask people for interviews? Are you always kind of a wallflower in public until people got to know you? Was this always easy to reach out to people? I guess that's the main question.
Not in a million years. No, I turn bright red. And that's the thing. I don't know if you can see it right now, but I turned bright red. So when I did Toastmasters for the first time, they told me to wear a turtleneck because it was distracting. It looked like I break out in hives. Aww. So it's quite sad, right? And I joke.
Comes up in counseling. Like, don't say things like that to people. Oh.
Right? It's so sad. And now I joke because I'm like, well, now I'm on stages that I'm so far away, but now they have cameras that like are up in your face, so people notice now too. Darn it, right? But I was always more of an introvert. I was voted most artistic in high school, and I was a programmer and did computers. So I was definitely not an extrovert in any way, and I turned red whenever I got even slightly nervous. So yay, go team. It was awesome for life. So the wonderful thing about being online is I don't actually have to, when I email someone, I can hit the send button and go, right? When I have a book and I interviewed Seth Godin and I was like, oh, I want him to give me a blurb for my book. My whole face was bright red, right? And I wrote the email and I just hit the send button and had my eyes closed. And he wrote back in like 10 minutes. And I'm like, right? So the more we do this, and again, it's pushing out of your comfort zone. We joke with in coaching, like your comfort zone will grow. So right now, especially for everybody going through this crazy uncertainty, your comfort zone is now growing, even though it sucks. I'm not saying it always is fun, but as it grows and grows, it gets easier. So the first 3 interviews that I did was like mind-blowingly horrible, right? Number one, don't ever interview somebody for a recording that you've never ever interviewed any human ever before. So I would have practiced. Please practice before you do that. Because that would have been something I would tell my older self. You know, once we get through like 20 or so interviews, it got easier and easier. It got easier to ask. It just becomes repetitive, so it's not as scary. Not that I'm not pushing myself out of my comfort zone now for many other ways too. There's a lot of things that are still scary, but you start to adapt and attune a lot more. And so those first few were ridiculously crazy, but it gets easier and easier and easier as you go.
There's 2 things that I want to unpack with that. This is great. So when doing the podcast, right? Did you do your very first one and millions of people showed up, and then people showed up to your house, knocked on your door, gave you balloons, carried you on their shoulders? Like, did you do 100 podcasts and then your mom finally was like, hey, by the way, I just want to let you know your uncle saw this, or anything like that? Like,
I'm just grateful that nobody listened to the first 3. Pretty much.
That's one way to look at it.
Much. Yeah, no, seriously, I joke about going back and putting that out there. I'm like, no, I don't want any. It's really horrible. Now, mind you, because back in the day, and this is sort of where things are going and trending, I'm such a geek into this stuff. Back then, there weren't that many podcasts. So it actually got picked up quickly. I was on a cruise and was like, wow, there was a lot of people. I think it was like 5,000 or 10,000 people listened to those first interviews. Yeah. And I was very embarrassed, just so we're clear. But that was amazing. That was where the trajectory was 10 years ago when podcasts really weren't what they are now. Nowadays, though, we have so many more people that are listening to podcasts, right? 51% of all Americans have listened to a podcast before. Just so you know. Oh, and another stat that you as a marketer will love is 41% of those make over $75,000 a year. So marketing ears perk up when that stuff comes up. So continue.
So the other part of it though is too. So, okay. So you, I am just kind of curious. So, well, Jaime won't say this unless you ask her directly. She's actually helped train and mentor some of the people who have just taken off like a rocket that do really, really, really well. They're in her mastermind. They'll credit her for her as well too. I know there's a really interesting, great list that you've helped out over the years. Well, the thing is kind of one of the other second reasons that I wanted to ask you about the whole podcast is because I know for myself as I was running, before I ran ads, I would go to an event and I was a wallflower because I wasn't speaking on stage. When I first went to the internet marketing party, I had to know the right people like Keith Baxter, what beer he liked to buy him beer, because that was my only connection point. Right? It wasn't to get drunk. It was just for someone like smart enough for him to talk to me long enough just so I can maybe try to be his friend. Like I just want a new circle of people. And it takes a long time to build relationships like that, right? I would go to the internet marketing party once a month. I'd try to volunteer and get to know people and buy people beer. Not like the whole bar, but very specific people because I didn't have much money and shake the right hands. Now, on the other side, you start doing 5, 10, 20, 30 podcasts and you're consistent on a regular basis. Now, a couple of years later, you go out to an event. Jaime, what's that experience like?
I feel cool finally. No, right?
You walk in, everyone knows you, people approach you, they want to talk to you. Like my wallflower problem of like, I'm just going to stand back here. People are like, Kurt, hey, what's going on? That's why I run ads when I'm at an event, because if I wasn't running ads, if you didn't know my brand, if you didn't see the belt that I carry around, I'd literally just be walking around like, I just want to hang out with somebody.
Exactly.
Maybe someone. So what's it like once you start doing this? Like, again, you don't need hundreds of thousands of people. I know that that's what you've accumulated over the years, but what's it like when you're consistently doing a podcast and you go to events and you're out and about?
Well, it's funny that you joke about this because literally I was so uncool in high school, right? So like because of
me.
that,
that's why I'm bringing this up. That's exactly why I'm bringing
because
this
of
up.
that, whenever I go into events, I remember my first networking event, and this is horrible. I like literally didn't talk to anybody, and I like talked to the person next to me the whole time. I was one of those people that like, don't leave, please.
100% me.
Yeah. It was great. And because I drove home from that one, I was like, I'm never doing networking events again. This is horrible. So what I did instead is start doing my due diligence before any events, right? So I would try and go, ooh, who are the speakers at the events? Who can I interview now? Because if I know them beforehand, then they'll be nice to me later.
Come on, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I do it's to make me feel better later, right? Like, what can I do? So that way, yeah, it's easier. Because that's the other thing. Oh, you're awestruck. I love it.
Wow.
I love it. Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like, they plan this stuff out. Events are always publicizing their speakers. They're publicizing their speakers 6 to 8 months out.
Yep.
So you're able to call up and say, hey, but like this, it's really brilliant. So by the time that you show up, you've already released your podcast, whether it's 10 people, 30 people, 50, 1,000. Yep. All of a sudden, even if 10 people know you out of the group, all of a sudden it becomes interesting. Thank you. My jaw just dropped, obviously. That was amazing.
But wait, there's more. But wait. So then one of my favorite tactics though, too, again, this is mostly just because I don't like being lonely and looking like I don't know what I'm doing. So then I'll invite them to a dinner. So either, and I get their text. It's way easier as a chick, by the way, to ask for text messages. Like, hey, can I have your phone number? Usually I try and put together a dinner or a lunch or just be the point person. Because then I have all of their cell phone numbers. They ask me if they can invite a friend, right? And I tell them in advance before, this is of course a long time ago when I was doing this a lot for lots of events, I was like, I'm not gonna pay for it. I'm gonna gather, I'm gonna be the connector and I'm gonna introduce you and I'm gonna have everybody's cell phone numbers because when I have their cell phone, then I'm their friend, right? It's one thing to interview them and have their only email address and their assistant gets that. It's totally another thing that I can text them at any point. And to me, that's where we start building out the relationship. So I look at them, I call them connection threads. So each one of these threads is building a deeper and deeper relationship, a thicker rope that you have. So that way you can call them up like you. I feel like we know each other so well, but to be able to do that with a bunch of other people and really deepen the relationship, then you're actually friends instead of just being, a person that got interviewed.
That's interesting because some people know this story. You absolutely know this story where when we go to the big event once a year, it's traffic and conversion. There's thousands of people out there. Well, what people do is they go to these big sponsored events. And for me is I'm really stimulated by smart conversation and I can talk all night long and listen all night long. And I may have a beer in my hand. I'm not drunk or anything else like that, but I don't want to be screaming because I don't want to lose my voice. I want to speak to other people. I don't want to be around a bunch of drunk people who are just babbling the entire time. So when everyone else goes to these huge events, I always host a very private party. It's not black tie. It costs me about $1,500, less than almost any other party that's thrown out there. You are not allowed to invite a +1. You can tell other people about it, but you're not allowed to bring any other guests. They must be on a guest list and completely pre-approved. It's only a list of 100. Everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, lots of people in the know talk about it because they're not invited. And they talk about not being invited. But I've built friendships from doing that, trying not to cater to everyone. Just like you said, I have their cell phone numbers. I can call them friends. Those are half the people in the summit. These are people like yourself as well too. That's how I built relationships over the years where we could have birthday parties together so we get to know each other. Not this like, hey, let's trade business cards and lie to each other that we'll never do business together.
Seriously. Yeah. And you are so good at the curation of humans. I think that's the other thing that on the internet, it's amazing to be able to be connected to everybody, but it's a totally different thing to curate and also deepen. And I think you're amazing at that. I had no idea you were so uncool before. You seem cool all along.
Yeah, I mean, the true story is I've told this on a couple of other interviews. I was a short, fat kid in school that always got picked on. And then I grew up in high school where I was just kind of a taller, fat kid that like, meh. And then I left high school and I kind of just grew more into it. And I ran call centers and stuff like that. But like, I liked being around lots of people. But once I ran a call center of 400 people, I'm like, I never want that many employees. And then once I found this online thing and people would trip upon my videos, people would start walking up to me and be like, oh my goodness, I saw this video. I learned this one thing. Oh my God, thank you so much. And it's like this drug that I had never taken before that was the most amazing feeling. And I'm like, it doesn't cost any money. I get to help people. They really like it. They don't care about my insecurities, about how I feel about myself or look on camera. They just like my advice. Oh my God, I can make friends just by literally producing good content and helping people. And almost every interview, and I want to get into this with you, has said, well, if you start providing value in a time like this, you can really become a leader. And most people feel in between their own ears, they don't have any value to add. What would you share to that, especially in a time like this?
Okay. Can I slap them through the camera? Am I allowed to slap somebody? Whack. And I felt the same way. It's not like everybody that's been a leader before. I work with ridiculously high level people that you'd be like, oh, wow, they got their shit together. And they don't always have their shit together. So number one, we all feel crappy.
People, they're all the exact same. I've worked with some amazing clients. You've interviewed these millionaires. And when you really get into it, they have the same caught up issues, problems.
Totally.
They're no different. They just have bigger problems.
We're humans. We're all supposed to go through this stuff. So whatever your issue is, just know that that's yours, and that's great. Own that. And hopefully as you move forward, you'll get through, like we got through many of our issues beforehand. And I know we still have more that are coming no matter what. Right. And so to hold yourself back though, when you can help others, this is something that has allowed me to get through. I'm a Enneagram number 2. I'm a helper. As much as I don't want to be that, I have to help all the people for all the things. It's kind of a thing. And so what's great is when I really get stuck inside my head, and I say this to anybody that wants to sort of be the leadership role that doesn't feel like they can, is that the more you step into it being about them and all the people that you're helping, you get out of your own, emotional mess of what's good enough for you. And every time, like even right before we did this call, I meditate anyway, because I got to get over my own brain issues, right? I meditate and I go, I want to be of service as much as humanly possible. So at the end of this interview, I want people to walk away with amazing value. And if that's the only thing that I show up to do, I did my work, right? I did the best I could and I did my work. And being okay with that as a human, even if it seems like it's crappy, because we can be super judgy, thank you very much, but to show up as a leader and care. It's the care that really needs to shine through, in my opinion. And I feel like this is what we all need right now. So thank you for caring enough, Kurt, to put all of this together and use all your time and resources. I know you're stuck at home anyway. I really appreciate talking to you right now, right? To actually have communication is amazing.
So I have 4 quick questions for you as we wrap this whole thing up before we go over on time. I really, really, really appreciate your time. So 4 questions. There are 3 different types of people on the call we've talked about before. There are beginners, there are intermediates. I want to help make this a more well-rounded belt strategy. So if you're watching this and you would like all the access to these interviews, the way that you get it is become part of the belt program, for the next year. Now, there's also some experts that want to dive in deeper. So in just a really quick succession, newbies, people who are kind of kicking things around, figuring out, like John Morrow had a really great point. He said, look, a lot of people are now working from home. They've never been exposed to that before. So now they have the ability where they're like, it's kind of opened their eyes. So what are some opportunities, if you had to start all over right now today, that you may be looking at or considering if you were starting out again?
Well, it's hilarious because that's actually what my book is about. I wish I could give it away for free for everybody, but I'll give away chapter 5 for free for everybody. So the book really talks about if you do quit your job, what are the best opportunities that millionaires have done? So I've actually interviewed, I've interviewed a bazillion, but we took data from over 100 businesses and what industries are working, where you see the opportunity. Like I said, I want to be a futurist when I grow up. And so I love tech and I love seeing where things are going. And this is the shift, right? There are opportunities opening everywhere, people. So I've got so many clients and more than half of them are doing extremely well during this time, even though everybody feels like, oh, woe is me, right? There are so many people that are thriving in these times. And if we could be focusing on what those are. So for the advice for the brand new people, I'll give them chapter 5, which is about finding a mentor. I think finding a mentor is extremely important because they'll hold you to a higher standard and get you out of your comfort zone. My mentor made me do 50 cold calls a day, which sucked because, again, I turned bright red. I was not a happy camper the entire time, but really flexing those getting out of your comfort zone muscles are going to be huge for you when you're just starting, because you're going to mess it up. Just so you know, as perfectionist tendencies as I am, tried not to, it was worse when I tried not to. So just go in knowing that it's going to suck a little and have fun.
What I'll do is I'll put a link here on the screen. It'll be thebelt.live/Jaime. Jaime spells her name in a very unique way, so it'll be spelled correctly on the link. Trust me, if it wasn't spelled correctly, I'd never hear the end of it as well. And she means very well, but I will make sure it is spelled correctly. So you see the link, and I'll talk to Jaime to make sure it goes to the right place for the book. Okay. Now, business owners. There are gym owners, there are restaurant owners, there are other people who are at home who could really diversify. This is another reason for these interviews. What's an idea that you may give someone to pivot a little bit on their business? I mean, maybe a podcast. I mean, is podcast oversaturated? What marketing advice would you give people on that pivot who are already marketing? They may just need a little bit shift in perspective.
I have clients in this exact situation right now. So number one, feeling safe is very important. So I'm going to give everybody the crisis cash management just as a piece, because it's hard to come from a place of space when you're like, and there goes all my money and I have to fire everyone, right? So depending on where you are right now and what your cash flow looks like, that's number one. But number two, building community. There are so many things we can do online. I've seen businesses switch like this to online, even though I know it feels like a lot for people that haven't done that before. I have a client that owns 5 weight loss centers in the Seattle area, and 5 in-person weight loss centers. We this whole time have been trying to prep virtual coaching for them for a really long time. Guess how fast we got that together, right? So now they have this whole new offering. We actually started a whole challenge with them to build their community because everybody's stuck at home, and guess who's emotional eating right now, right? All of the people. So there are different ways that you can actually challenge and build your community during these times and do that give back. That's going to make all the difference. Because like you've heard probably a million times over, the people that are showing up to lead, because people need leaders right now more than anything, showing up to lead and not necessarily be hardcore crazy nutso about selling whatever their product is. Don't get me wrong, everybody needs to make sales. Go ahead and sell. But to really be there as a leader in your community is huge. So what can you do to show up that's better for everybody? So that way we don't all feel so alone. Even though we're lonely, right? We are alone in our houses. We don't have to feel lonely when we can really have a gathering that we've got.
Will you mind holding up your book again one more time? Just so if people want to, they can get that on Amazon, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so if you guys want to Google it and go to Amazon, I'll give you a link. I'll give you some resources over to Jaime. But the thing is make sure you listen to the podcast, Eventual Millionaire. You'll see the link down here as well, too. So we talked about the beginner. We talked about intermediate. Really, the advice that you just gave is great for intermediate and expert. That's really how they can shift their business. There's lots of room out there to even do podcasts or talk about local, lots of different subjects. Again, you don't need a huge audience. It's just a micro audience that really cares about you. So last question to wrap this up. Again, thank you so much for your time. In this downtime, I mean, you have a lot of crazy things that are going on at home. You're running a business, a bunch of other stuff going on. What are you focused on sharpening your axe on? Like, what's one of the things that you like to be a futurist, looking towards the future? What's some things that you're working on right now that may be interesting to other people that shows them what they may be looking at?
Okay, so one of the things, and this is sort of for the experts also, because I don't feel like we do enough deep work. And if you haven't read that book yet by Cal Newport, it's absolutely amazing. Now is the time when we actually have the time and space to go way more deep. So I'm meditating a lot more. I'm doing writing and with pen, like actual writing, right? To really start bringing up, especially for me, connection is such a huge thing. So we're talking about making a framework based around all of this. So I have to go internal, which is a wonderful thing. I have a meditation closet, which I know you've seen. So that's what I'm actually spending a lot of time on, to really go, what do I care about without all the noise and all the craziness, as best as we possibly can. And that's what I challenge all the experts to do too, right? Instead of going, what's the latest tactic? What's the next new thing, right? Let's be a little more analog and let's actually understand what we care about. I think you've known this, but my kiddo's dad has cancer, a year or two to live. And when you start realizing how much time we actually have right now, I know it feels like the world is ending at the moment, but it's not. We're going to keep living. Where do you really want to be at the end of all this? And if you still have that music inside of you, now is the time to actually let it out. And I challenge everybody to just push out of their comfort zone a little bit more in regards to that.
That's awesome. I love you and appreciate you. Thank you for all your time today. You're
love
amazing.
You too.
Thank you.
Love you too.
See you. Have a great day, Jaime. Thanks.
You too.
Bye.